Hi, I'm Randall. I grew up along the coast of Maine, and that's where my love of the ocean started. I sailed over 10,000 miles in my 20s, and after hanging up my Fowlies, I rediscovered my love of the bicycle. Both cycling and sailing connect me to nature and give me a sense of freedom and adventure. Now, I'm going to try to combine the two. I bought this old sailboat with the goal of sailing it to the Caribbean and then to Europe to do some epic sailing and exploring by bike. But first, I've got to refit and modernize this big old classic. Oh, and I'm on an insanely tight budget, so I'm going to do as much of the work as I can myself. And if I can do it, so can you. Special shout out and thank you to our newest Patreon supporters. Thanks so much for jumping on board. Your support helps keep this show chugging along, so thanks very much. If you got my last episode, you saw me spend the better part of 2 months wrangling with my engine room and trying to clean it up. As part of buttoning up the engine room, I thought it'd be a good idea to clean up the wiring, and that meant tracing things, labeling it, and getting rid of stuff that's not being used, including equipment that's not being used. So that's the focus of this episode. It's going to be all about trying to get it as simple as possible. So first, let me do a little bit of drone repair. I got the drone back alive and flying, but the camera just would not connect and work. That leads me to my next segment, which is how am I going to pay for a replacement? I just want to take a quick second to say welcome and thank you to our friends at Ritual. Ritual is a maker of high quality, highly transparent multivitamins and supplements, such as their new product, which is called Symbiotic Plus. They reached out and sent me a sample package to try out. So I've been using their multivitamins, their regular multivitamins. One nice thing about Ritual as a company is they believe in total transparency. So they list every single ingredient, they list every single supplier of that ingredient, and then they also link the studies that are associated with those ingredients. So they're kind of telling you where it's from and why they're making the decisions to put it in there. And I really like that about the company. Ritual's really excited about this new product, which is called Symbiotic Plus, which actually is the first of its kind to have a 3-in-1 biotic. So that means they have a prebiotic, a probiotic, and then a postbiotic. And so the prebiotic is supporting growth and activity of the bacteria that's living in the gut. The probiotic is actually the living microorganisms that are designed to relieve gas, bloating, and occasional diarrhea, which is super important on a boat. And then there's a postbiotic, which provides fuel for the cells that make up the lining of the gut. You're really getting all of that in this one capsule. It's this single nested capsule like this. So it smells like a spearmint to me, which makes it a lot easier to go down. Symbiotic Plus it's a delayed release technology that releases each biotic in the right spot. So whether that's colon or intestine, etc., they've got that science figured out. It's not required to be refrigerated, which is really great on a boat. It's a clean formula. It's totally traceable. It's also vegan friendly. They are offering fans of our show 25% off for your first month. Use the QR code here, which you can scan with your smartphone, or you can use this link here, which is ritual.com/YH25. Just want to say thanks again to our friends at Ritual. And if you want to support the show, go ahead and use the link and save a few bucks, and back to the show. So while I was prepping to overhaul the engine room, I started to really take inventory of the wiring. So what you'll see is me dealing with the wiring a little bit before and a little bit after all the engine room overhaul and insulation work. I noticed the starter battery area had a little bit of wetness and the battery box was sitting on this piece of plywood, so I decided to get rid of that and take a peek and see what's under it, see if there's any rot or anything. It was surprisingly tidy. There were a few bits of dust and chunks of plywood, but not too bad. So I was sitting here looking at these wires that go aft near the engine, and they really curve right around towards the transmission, and there's no heat protection or chafing protection on any of these wires. So to me, that's a point of concern. And the same goes for the forward part of the engine. There's a bunch of wires that kind of drape around the front of the engine. There's a lot of heat, there's a lot of movement, and so I want to secure these. I want to label them, I want to trace them and figure out what's what. I don't know if any of you are like that, where When things feel overwhelming, what feels good is to kind of bring a little bit of order to the chaos that's in front of you. So like right now I've got the cabin relatively happy and clean and cleaned out, and even the cabinets I've got, you know, kind of pretty sparse. Even my nav table here. And then even looking back, I've got things pretty well tidied up at the workbench here. So I think it's very cathartic for me to be able to pull out some of the stuff and replace it, or just decommission it, throw it in the bin, and make it tidier. So I've been tracing and cleaning out a bunch of stuff out of my electrical room, and you know, I have to say, at first glance, super overwhelming. I'm looking at this pile of wires, right, all through here, and it seems crazy, super chaotic, but really we're talking about like, I don't know, 40 wires I gotta figure out and trace. It's a good lesson to take things one bite at a time. Looking around the electrical panel, I can see that I've got this giant autopilot control unit, and if I pull that out and all the accompanying wiring, that's gonna clean up quite a bit for me. Not to mention, I also have the single sideband radio and all the wiring that goes with that. And I don't plan on using that anytime soon, so I'm gonna pull that out as well. That should make some of the tracing work a little bit easier. Back in 1973, this wood Freeman system was pretty cutting edge. It's an analog compass with some pickup sensors on it. And that sends the signal back to the control unit, and you control the setting with a wired remote control, which I was so eager to rip out, I clipped the wires and yanked those and put them away before I got the cameras rolling. As part of this archaeology project, I had a nice little chuckle with a little graphic that someone put on there that said, "Handle compass like eggs." I find that pretty charming. And not to mention, I have a beastly power unit that actually powers the gears for the autopilot. So the wiring goes from the motor unit to the compass, from the compass to the control box, from the control box to the remote. So taking all of that out is going to lighten the load by quite a bit. If you're wondering, I did try to fire it up multiple times, trying to get any sign of life out of it, and no bueno. There was nothing, no signs of life, no signs of any type of movement or anything. So that made this decision a little bit easier. And when I say this thing was a beast, I think it might weigh 70 pounds. I used a little antifreeze jug to prop that chain out of the way so I could get enough maneuverability. That was not easy. Get the blood pumping. Whew. Emptying out that area and prepping it for some cleaning means I might be able to clean up that bilge and paint it, especially if I'm thinking about doing anything with my steering and my quadrant. Next up is to deal with my delicate compass, and I am definitely going to handle it like eggs. Part of me is a little sad that this doesn't work because it's a pretty cool piece of technology from 1973. Although you can see how many wires are just being fed fore and aft, it's going to lighten the load. Not that lightening the load by 70 pounds will matter on a 30,000 pound boat.
Oh yeah.
You can tell I'm pretty satisfied by yanking out even just a handful of wires. The autopilot steering box is in the bottom of the picture. And so these are the wires that lead up to the remote control. And I'm just yanking those out. Next up is the, well, it's not quite a computer, but for 1973 it might be. Now, the remote control actually has this plug to plug into up near the companionway steps, so I can take that out, and I can also remove the wiring that goes to that. You also notice this chain here, which is actually part of the centerboard mechanism. The hydraulic centerboard system used to be powered, not a shocker, that no longer works, and now it's just a manual pump for now. I have a few ideas as to how to bring power back to that system somewhere down the road. I can't even tell what that says. I was gonna say centerboard electrical, but I see like a SW. Anybody else want to play a puzzle? What does that say? All right. It's getting pulled anyway. Don't need it. Don't think so. Yeah, that's a little disappointment in my voice. After finding the first or second electrical wire that had a label on it, and then the label is illegible, you have to laugh, I guess. With the big autopilot components out of the way, I can now start yanking and trimming out the wires. As part of the process, I'm discovering that there are other wires that have either been orphaned or go to components that are no longer there, so I'm happy to be able to clean up more than just the autopilot wiring. Oh, I'm saving so much money on yoga classes. Both orphaned. Wow, we got a double orphan. Looks like speaker wire. Wow. Another orphan. This is what we call a baby snake pit, which, yeah, let's just get right in there. Oh yeah. And cable up the wazoo. Whew. And more, and more. Someone was allergic to labeling. I'm gonna be the archaeologist for the next couple weeks, I think. Whew. It's a pretty legit puzzle, so if you want puzzles, this is a good way to do it. I think it's just it's a lesson in perseverance and just plugging things off one at a time, finding a good podcast, a good book, some inspirational music, put it on, and this is it's a bunch of puzzles to solve. So I'm pretty happy. This is a happy place for me to come on here and enjoy the journey and getting to know it inside and out. A lot of you have had comments like, oh yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm getting to know my boat from stern to bow. And there's nothing more satisfying than knowing if stuff goes wrong out at sea. I know every single inch, and I'm gonna document it really, really well. I'm gonna label the hell out of everything so that if at some point I don't own this boat, the next owner is gonna be really, really comfortable right away. There's some joy in leaving something better than you found it, I think. I know there is for me anyway. Anyway, back to tracing wires and pulling some more out and labeling like crazy.
What the hell? Let's go crazy.
All right, so here's how the compass area turned out. There we go. This is where the compass is mounted, cleaned up, got some total bilge paint on here. That stuff goes on nice and thick and looks nice and tidy. In fact, it's making this other wood look a little bit beat up, but this is an amazing amount of space to be able to, just to give you a reference here, that's my whole arm. That's probably 16 inches deep, probably like 24 inches with a little curve there, but what a great little storage area for like off-season clothes or whatever. I ended up doing a little bit more cleaning up down here, so that's looking pretty good. As far as cables go, the cable closet, I had a variable antenna tuner for the SSB, so that's gone, as is the wiring, and some of the wiring here is cleaned up. Still a ways to go. So speaking of wiring, how did I make out in the engine room? What does it look like now? Well, here we go. Couple of things. New battery box, tight, small, just enough for the battery. That gives me good visibility, access to my dipstick, my transmission fluid dipstick, which I hadn't ever seen before. I put this new nylon plate down instead of that piece of plywood. This is mounted in with some threaded inserts, so I can take this in and out at will if I need to get under it. But here is the big thing. So, water heater, generator, starboard winch, battery monitors, pump by the oven. Want to see where else I'm labeled? Here. Got some heat protection, some chafing protection, some mounts. Chafing and heat protection here. More heat protection here. More labels. Chafing and heat protection mounts there. How about up here? All right. More labels, 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 labels. Everything traced, sorted. To me, this feels like I know what's going on. If I need to grab something, this feels very good. So you'll notice these little brackets. So these are similar to these here. I like these because I can screw them in. They're plastic. I can undo them, unlike cable ties. Cable ties are great. You know, they're permanent. You know, clip them off, whatever. This allows me to undo it. It allows me to get kind of a bigger chunk. If I want to add stuff to it, I can. I just find them simpler and easier. So I've got these kind of mounting stuff all around. I've even got some labels up here. More stuff labeled, like what goes to what. But this allows me to kind of tuck them against the wall. They're plastic, they're not going to corrode. They've got one stainless screw holding them in place. That's my thought on how to make it a little bit more tidy. I still have a couple of lines, like this guy has run so tight, there's no slack in this thing whatsoever. So I'm going to put another little heat shield on that. That goes to my starboard winch. All right, next up, all the other wiring up here. More labels. Oh, we can see actually that one's kind of worn off a little bit. But even if it's not connected to anything, you know, I'm going to say not connected or it's orphaned. NEMA 2000 backbone. What is this? Oh, that goes to your water pump. So I've got labels pretty much on everything. And even here, all right, traced everything, labeled everything. Even if it's orphaned, windlass. No, I didn't secure that one. Well, pay attention to that, will we? Sloppy job. More NEMA. NEMA 2000 to the mast. So pretty darn tidy.
Pretty good.
I got to this cabinet okay. I whittled down a few of the things. I still have 3 orphans right there that I haven't dealt with. For me, the biggest thing was getting this engine room tidy and understood and secure, and try to trim down some of the wiring. I'm just gonna keep plugging away at this. So I've got this little Amazon thermal printer, which is great, doesn't use ink. So, and you can kind of pick whatever color label you like, whether it's yellow or whatever, nice for color coding stuff. You use this little app, and then when you're ready to print, you say print. And there we go. Damn it. Well, it doesn't always work the way you want. Grab this tape, which is a special clear thermal protected tape, so it's not gonna melt or anything when it gets up to temperature. So this is pretty good. The stickiness is not amazing, but I wanted something that was heat resistant so that as I get labels, close to the engine, it would be pretty well protected from melting or getting messed up. I'll put a link to these things below. I think these things are great. They're relatively inexpensive. If you're curious about some of the other labeling, I did get to other parts here to label as well. This is deeper in the engine room. I thought this was kind of important to get to, especially up here where, it's just kind of chaos. So getting labels on everything is kind of critical for a newbie like me. I have a little bit of an idea, and I don't know if anyone's interested in it, but I have this cool old compass, handle compass like eggs, and I have the control unit. I looked on eBay and some of them are selling for, $80 or something, but I thought it might be more interesting because I know we have some clever and creative viewers out there. So here's what I was thinking. If you have a creative idea as to what to do with this compass and you want to do something with it, throw a comment down below with your idea, and whoever gets the most thumbs up for their idea, I'll send the compass off to. And if you really want the control unit too, I'm happy to send that. You won't have to pay for anything. And you'll get this kind of cool old piece of history and a little piece of this boat. And if you're curious about some of the products that I use for this video, I've got links in the description below. And of course, thanks so much to our Patreon supporters. Without your support, this really wouldn't be possible, so I really appreciate it. You guys are the best.